The first thing I smelled when I opened my jewelry box wasn't my perfume. It was bleach and copper. My heirloom pearls were gone, replaced by a single damp strand of my own hair. My husband, Mark, was downstairs in the garden, laughing with the woman who was currently wearing those pearls and my favorite silk dress. Her name is Rebecca. Everyone thinks she's our savior. But I just found the Project Phoenix folder on her laptop. It contains a calendar of my life, and it ends tonight. In exactly 4 hours, at midnight, Mark is signing the papers to have me committed to a psychiatric ward. He thinks I've lost my mind because Rebecca spent months making sure I look insane. She's already frozen my bank accounts and told my daughter I'm sending her away. The police are already on their way, and they aren't coming to help me. They're coming to take me. Let me take you back to the moment I realized the woman in my kitchen wasn't a guest. She was a replacement. The blue progress bar on the monitor crawled toward the edge, a pixelated lifeline. Sarah Johnson's thumb hovered over the eject button, the plastic casing of the drive slick with her palms sweat. Outside, the gravel driveway crunched under tires. A car door slammed, heavy, metallic, final. She yanked the drive from the port as the front lock clicked. The scent of stale coffee and ozone filled the small office, pressing against her lungs. "Sarah, you home?" Rebecca's voice drifted through the hallway, sharp and polished like a scalpel. Mark's heavier tread followed, a rhythmic thud against the hardwood. Sarah shoved the thumb drive into the bottom of a porcelain vase on the bookshelf, the ceramic clinking against the wood. She turned as the door swung open. Rebecca stood in the frame, her silk blouse shimmering under the fluorescent light. She held a manila folder against her chest like a shield. Mark loomed behind her, his eyes tracing the tangled mess of wires snaking from Sarah's computer. "Working late?" Rebecca asked, her lips curling into a practiced smile that failed to reach her eyes. Sarah wiped her damp hands on her jeans. "I couldn't sleep. The Phoenix data needs a final scrub before the board meeting." Rebecca stepped inside, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm on the floor. She reached out, her fingers brushing the warm casing of the CPU. The fan whirred, a frantic mechanical heartbeat in the sudden silence. "It's a hot night for data entry," Mark muttered, his gaze fixed on the empty USB port. Rebecca's smile widened. "We thought we'd save you the trip tomorrow. Give us the drive, Sarah. Let's put this project to bed." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her skin cold despite the humid Illinois night. She looked at Mark, her husband of 10 years, searching for a flicker of the man who used to read her thoughts before she spoke them. Instead, she saw a stranger, his jaw set in a line of weary impatience. He was counting again. She could see his lips moving in a silent, rhythmic pulse, 1, 2, 3, as he paced the small rug. "I'm not finished, Mark," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly. "There are inconsistencies in the secondary logs. I need to cross-reference the timestamps." Rebecca took a step closer. She smelled of expensive jasmine and something sharp, like bleach hidden under floral notes. She was the perfect friend, the one who had appeared at a charity gala 6 months ago and seamlessly stitched herself into the fabric of their lives. She brought organic kale smoothies for Sarah's migraines and helped Chloe with her Mandarin homework. She was a godsend, everyone said. "Sarah, honey," Rebecca murmured, reaching out to touch Sarah's shoulder. The silk of her sleeve hissed against Sarah's skin. "You're exhausted. You're seeing ghosts in the machine again. Let Mark and me take it from here. We'll drop it off at the office on our way to breakfast." Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew what was on that drive. She had spent the last 3 hours pulling back the digital curtain on Project Phoenix, the restructuring plan Rebecca had supposedly designed to save Mark's firm. It wasn't a rescue plan. It wasn't a rescue. It was a roadmap for a hostile takeover, a systematic deletion of Mark's partners, and eventually, Mark himself. "I'll have it ready by morning," Sarah insisted, her fingers finding her wedding ring and beginning the frantic click, click, click against her knuckle. "I just need to verify the packet headers. A 10% margin of error is unacceptable." Mark sighed, a heavy sound that vibrated in the small room. "Rebecca's right. You're obsessing. It's just data, Sarah. It's not a conspiracy." He reached for the vase on the shelf, his hand hovering inches from where the drive lay hidden. Sarah's breath hitched. She stepped forward, intercepting him by grabbing his forearm. His skin felt like sun-warmed stone, familiar and yet miles away. "Let's go to the kitchen," Sarah said, her mind racing to find a diversion. "I'll make some decaf. We can talk about the 4th of July party." Jennifer Lewis called 3 times about the catering. The mention of their neighbors seemed to break the tension. Mark nodded, his shoulders dropping an inch. Rebecca's eyes lingered on the computer screen for a heartbeat longer than necessary, her pupils dark and unreadable, before she turned to follow them. As they walked down the hallway, the house felt different to Sarah. The hospital white walls seemed to vibrate under the recessed lights. Every shadow looked like a smudge of ink on a clean page. She felt like a guest in her own home, a ghost haunting a life that was being slowly overwritten by a more efficient program. In the kitchen, the air was thick with the scent of lemon-scented floor wax. Sarah moved with mechanical precision, setting out the mugs. She needed to buy time. She needed to get that drive out of the house and to someone who could help her decode the rest of the encrypted files. "I was thinking," Sarah said, her back to them as she poured the water. "We should update my journal tonight. You know, for the family archives." Rebecca tilted her head, her oversized designer glasses perched on top of her perfectly coiffed hair. "A journal? How charmingly analog of you, Sarah Johnson." "It's a legacy project," Sarah lied, her voice steadying. "I've been documenting the family history. I actually found some old records today about a trust fund my great-uncle left. A significant inheritance tied to the property in Maine." She watched Rebecca out of the corner of her eye. The bait was set. If Rebecca was truly after their assets, the mention of a hidden, unrecorded inheritance would be irresistible. Rebecca's posture shifted, her spine straightening as she mirrored Sarah's lean against the counter. "An inheritance?" Rebecca asked, her voice dropping to a melodic whisper. "How fascinating. Where do you keep these records?" "In the study," Sarah said, handing a mug to Mark. "In the old leather-bound ledger. I'll show you later, after we've had our tea." Mark smiled, that golden retriever grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "See? This is the Sarah I love. Planning for the future. No more talk about Project Phoenix tonight, okay?" Sarah nodded, her heart still thrumming. She had planted a fake journal entry in the study an hour ago. A detailed forged account of a non-existent $1 million trust. If Rebecca went for it, it would prove she was monitoring Sarah's private papers. It was a digital forensic trick applied to the physical world. A honeypot. The tea was bitter, or perhaps it was just the taste of the lies in the room. Sarah watched Rebecca sip from her cup, the woman's eyes scanning the kitchen with predatory efficiency. Every few minutes, the lawn sprinkler outside hit the plastic fence with a rhythmic worth whack, a sound that made Sarah's skin crawl. "I forgot my phone in the car," Sarah said suddenly, standing up. I need to check the weather for the party. I can get it for you, Mark offered, already halfway out of his chair. No. Sarah's voice was too sharp. She softened it immediately. No, I need the fresh air. My head is... it's a bit foggy. The humidity, I think. She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed her heavy designer tote from the mudroom bench and slipped out the side door. The night air hit her like a wet blanket, thick and smelling of scorched dust and incoming rain. The driveway was a dark ribbon of gravel. Sarah fumbled with her keys, her fingers shaking. She just needed to get to the car, get the drive, which she had managed to snag from the vase when they weren't looking, and drive to the 24-hour diner 3 miles away. She reached her SUV, the door handle hot and tacky under her touch. She pulled it open, but before she could slide into the seat, a shadow detached itself from the side of the garage. A man stood there, his face obscured by a dark hood. He didn't say a word. He just lunged, his hand reaching for the strap of her bag. Sarah screamed, the sound swallowed by the sudden roll of thunder. She swung the heavy leather tote with everything she had. The bag, filled with her laptop and the heavy brass base of a desk lamp she'd been meaning to fix, caught the man in the side of the head. He grunted, stumbling back, but he didn't stop. He grabbed her arm, his grip like cold iron. The smell of stale menthol cigarettes rolled off him. This wasn't a random mugger. This was Gary Thompson, the private investigator she had seen lurking near her office. Give me the bag, Sarah, he growled, his voice a low rattle. Get away from me. Sarah kicked out, her heel catching his shin. They scrambled in the dirt, the rain beginning to fall in fat, heavy drops that hissed against the hot pavement. Sarah felt the rough gravel bite into her knees as they fell. She clawed at his face, her nails catching skin. He shoved her against the car, the metal door groaning under the impact. In a surge of adrenaline, Sarah grabbed the edge of the car door and swung it shut with all her might. Gary's hand was still gripped on the frame. There was a sickening crunch, the sound of bone meeting steel, and a howl of pain that tore through the night. He slumped to the ground, clutching his mangled hand. Sarah didn't look back. She scrambled into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and threw the car into reverse. The tires shrieked against the gravel, spitting stones as she roared out of the driveway. Her breath came in ragged gasps that fogged the windshield. Her hands were stained with grease and a dark smear of Gary's blood. She drove blindly, her mind a chaotic storm of what-if scenarios. She reached the Starburst Diner 10 minutes later, the neon sign flickering a sickly pink against the downpour. Inside, the air smelled of burnt grease and industrial floor cleaner. She slumped into a corner booth, her laptop humming as it pulled power from the outlet. Her fingers flew across the keys, bypassing the basic security on the thumb drive she had stolen from Rebecca's laptop earlier. She expected to see financial spreadsheets. She expected to see the Project Phoenix blueprints. Instead, a folder labeled SJ_archive appeared on the screen. Sarah clicked it open. Her breath hitched. The screen filled with photos. There she was, 3 years ago, at a grocery store in a town she'd lived in before meeting Mark. There she was at her father's funeral, standing alone by the grave. There were photos of her wedding, her honeymoon, the first time she brought Chloe home from the hospital. Every image was taken from a distance, through a long lens. This wasn't a recent corporate plot. Rebecca hadn't just stumbled into her life. This was a long con, a stalking that had spanned years. Rebecca Miller, or whoever she really was, had been documenting Sarah's life, learning her patterns, her weaknesses, her very essence, long before they had ever met. The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow to the stomach. She leaned over the table, her forehead resting on the cool, sticky laminate. The diner's jukebox was playing a low, distorted country song, the bass vibrating through the floorboards. She wasn't being replaced. She was being erased. Sarah sat in the flickering neon glow of the diner for an hour, the surveillance photos of her own life staring back at her like a funeral procession. The rain hammered against the windows, a relentless, rhythmic drumming that matched the pulsing ache in her temples. She had to go back. If she stayed away, it would only prove their narrative, that she was unstable, that she had snapped. When she pulled back into the driveway, the house looked like a tomb, its white siding gleaming under the streetlights. She walked through the front door, her clothes damp and smelling of wet asphalt. The silence was heavy, broken only by a soft, rhythmic sobbing coming from the living room. She found Chloe huddled on the sofa, her small face streaked with tears. Her favorite teddy bear was clutched so tightly to her chest that its seams were straining. "Chloe? Baby? What happened?" Sarah knelt on the floor, reaching out. Chloe flinched. The movement was small, but it cut Sarah deeper than any physical blow. Miss Rebecca said, "She said you were tired of being a mommy." "What?" Sarah's voice was a jagged whisper. "She said you found a special school for me, a long way away, where I have to stay all the time so you can be perfect again." Chloe's voice broke into a fresh sob. "I'm sorry, Mommy. I'll be quieter, I promise." No, Chloe, that's not true." Sarah tried to pull her daughter into a hug, but the girl remained stiff, her eyes wide and fearful. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, a glass of warm milk in her hand. She looked devastated, a perfect mask of concern. "Sarah, thank God you're back. Mark was about to call the police. You vanished." "You told her I was sending her away," Sarah said, her voice trembling with a cold, white-hot rage. Rebecca sighed, a soft, pitying sound. "We talked about this, Sarah. Your memory. It's getting so fragmented. You were the one who brought up the boarding school in Switzerland last week. You said you couldn't handle the noise anymore." "I never said that." "Mommy's shouting," Chloe whispered, burying her face in the bear. "I'm not shouting, Sarah caught herself. She looked at Rebecca, who was watching her with a faint, triumphant glimmer in her eyes. Rebecca wasn't just stealing the future. She was rewriting the past, turning Sarah's own daughter into a witness against her. "Go to bed, Chloe," Sarah said, her voice tight. "We'll talk in the morning." Once the girl had scurried upstairs, Sarah turned on Rebecca. "I know what's on the drive. I saw the photos. You've been following me for years." Rebecca didn't blink. She took a slow sip of the milk, her throat moving in a graceful swallow. "Photos? Sarah, you really should get some sleep. You're imagining things again. Just like you imagined someone attacked you in the driveway. Mark found your bag in the bushes. You must have dropped it when you tripped." "I didn't trip. Gary Thompson was..." "Who?" Rebecca tilted her head. "I don't know any Gary. But I do know that your bank called. They were very concerned about the large wire transfers you tried to make to that offshore account this afternoon." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "I didn't make any transfers. The logs say otherwise." Rebecca reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, silver pair of scissors. She began to absent-mindedly snip at a loose thread on her sleeve. Snip, snip, snip. In fact, they were so concerned, they've frozen all the joint accounts until a legal guardian can be appointed. For your own protection, of course. Sarah lunged for her phone, her fingers flying across the screen to open her banking app. Access denied. Please contact customer service. She tried her credit card app. Account suspended. She was locked out. In the span of 2 hours, Rebecca had stripped her of her daughter's trust and her financial autonomy. She was a ghost in her own house, standing on a rug she had picked out, under a roof she paid for, with no way to prove she existed. The next few days were a blur of psychological warfare. Sarah found her favorite vintage perfume, the one her grandmother had given her, smashed on the bathroom floor, the cloying scent of roses and musk filling the room until she felt sick. When she showed Mark, he just sighed and pointed to the bruise on her own arm. "You're hurting yourself, Sarah. You're doing these things and then forgetting. It's the dementia." The doctor Rebecca found. He explained everything. "I don't have dementia, Mark. She's gaslighting us." But Mark was already counting. 7, 8, 9. He was retreating into his own world of numbers and safety, unable to face the chaos. The most chilling moment came when Sarah went to her walk-in closet to find something to wear for the neighborhood association meeting. She pulled open the heavy oak doors and stopped. Her clothes were gone, all of them. Her vibrant silk dresses, her worn-in jeans, the soft cashmere sweaters she loved. In their place hung rows of identical beige linen sets. They were the exact same size, the exact same style. It was as if her entire personality had been bleached out of the fabric. She touched a sleeve. It felt cold, stiff, new. She ran to the laundry room, thinking maybe there had been a mistake. The basement was dark, the only light coming from the small, high windows. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, the overhead light flickered and died. The scent of industrial bleach hit her, sharp and burning. "Mark," she called out. A shadow moved near the furnace. It wasn't Mark. It was a man in blue coveralls, the handyman Rebecca had hired to fix the leaky pipes. Kevin Miller. He was humming a low, distorted version of Rockabye Baby. "Power's out," he said, his voice flat. He held a heavy pipe wrench in one hand. "I just need to check the breaker," Sarah said, her heart hammering. "Breaker's fine," Kevin said, stepping into her path. He was tall, his muscles corded and tense. He looked at the heavy, industrial-sized furnace, its metal maw glowing with a dull orange light. "The safety valve on this thing is shot. Could blow any second. Dangerous place for a lady who's losing her mind." He moved toward her, his footsteps heavy on the concrete. Sarah backed away, her calf hitting the edge of the washing machine. "Rebecca says you're a liability," Kevin whispered, the humming stopping. "Says it's better if there's an accident before the party. Clean and easy." He lunged. Sarah dodged, his wrench clattering against the metal side of the dryer with a bone-jarring thud. She scrambled toward the storage shelves, her hands fumbling in the dark. Her fingers closed around a heavy plastic jug. Bleach. Kevin grabbed her hair, yanking her head back. Sarah screamed, the sound echoing off the low concrete ceiling. She twisted, uncapping the jug with a frantic jerk of her wrist, and flung the contents backward into his face. The liquid hit him squarely in the eyes. Kevin let out a shriek that sounded more like a wounded animal than a man. He dropped the wrench, his hands flying to his face as the caustic chemicals began to burn. "My eyes! You bitch, my eyes!" Sarah didn't wait. She scrambled up the stairs, her lungs burning from the fumes. She slammed the basement door and turned the deadbolt, the metal click sounding like a gunshot in the quiet house. She leaned against the door, gasping for air. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold her phone. She needed to tell Mark. Now. He had to see. He had to believe her. She found him in the study, staring at a stack of papers on his desk. Mark, listen to me," she cried, her voice raw. "The handyman, Kevin, he tried to kill me. He's in the basement right now. I had to use bleach to—" "Sarah, stop." Mark didn't look up. His voice was hollow, defeated. "No, you don't understand. He admitted it. Rebecca hired him to—" Mark finally looked at her. He held up a manila folder. "Rebecca gave me these this morning. They're your medical records from the Mayo Clinic. Forensic evaluations, brain scans." "I've never been to the Mayo Clinic," Sarah whispered. "They show early onset hereditary dementia, Sarah. The same thing your father had. It explains the paranoia, the attacks, the financial irregularities." He looked at her with a profound, soul-crushing pity. "She was trying to protect you. She didn't want me to know how bad it was because she knew I'd have to make a choice. Subverted. Phase 1. Smart decision." Sarah felt a surge of cold, analytical clarity. This was the moment. She had the physical proof. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the thumb drive, the one she had hidden at the diner. "Mark, look at me. I am a data forensics specialist. I know how to spot a forgery. These medical records are fake. I have the actual Project Phoenix files right here. I have the surveillance photos of me from 3 years ago. Rebecca has been stalking me. This drive contains every bit of evidence we need to go to the police. Just plug it in. Look at the metadata. It will show you exactly when and where these files were created." She spoke with the calm authority of a professional. This was her terrain. Data didn't lie. Once Mark saw the timestamps, the house of cards would collapse. Phase 2. False positive. Mark hesitated, his gaze flickering between the drive and the medical folder. Slowly, he reached out and took the small piece of plastic. "Metadata?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You mean the digital footprint?" "Yes," Sarah breathed, relief washing through her like a warm tide. "The footprint. It will show Rebecca's IP address. It will show the edits she made to those medical scans. Just look, Mark, please." Mark walked over to his laptop. He plugged the drive in. The small LED on the side began to blink, a steady, rhythmic blue. He clicked through the folders. Sarah watched his face, waiting for the dawn of realization. His eyes widened. He scrolled through the photos, the documents, the logs. "My God," he whispered. "Sarah, I had no idea." He looked up at her, his expression softening into the man she knew. "I'm so sorry. I should have listened." Phase 3. The crack. Sarah stepped forward to comfort him, her hand reaching for his shoulder. But she stopped. Something was wrong. Mark wasn't looking at her with love. He was looking at her with a horrified, mounting dread. He wasn't closing the files. He was opening a specific subfolder she hadn't seen before. A folder labeled S_Johnson_confession. "Mark?" she asked, a cold prickle dancing across her skin. He turned the screen toward her. A video began to play. It was Sarah. Or rather, it was a woman who looked exactly like Sarah, wearing the beige linen set she had found in her closet. The woman was sitting in their bedroom, looking directly into the camera. "I don't know how much longer I can hide it," the Sarah on screen said, her voice a perfect staccato mimicry of Sarah's own. "The voices, they tell me Mark is the enemy, that I need to delete him. I'm making up stories about Rebecca to keep him distracted. If you're watching this, Mark, I've already done something terrible." Phase 4. Catastrophic reveal. "That's not me," Sarah screamed, lunging for the laptop. "Mark, that's a deep fake. I never recorded that." But the damage was done. Mark pulled the laptop away, his face hardening into a mask of pure terror. "You gave me this drive, Sarah. You told me to look at it. You wanted me to find this, didn't you? A cry for help?" "No. She planted that. She knew I would take the drive. It's a trap." "A trap?" Mark stood up, backing away from her as if she were a ticking bomb. "Sarah, look at yourself. You're covered in bleach. You just told me you attacked a man in our basement. And now you give me a drive that contains a video of you admitting you're losing your mind?" The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. Rebecca hadn't just followed her. She had anticipated her countermove. She had allowed Sarah to steal the drive. The surveillance photos were the bait to ensure Sarah would show it to Mark. But the confession was the hook. By handing Mark the evidence, Sarah had hand-delivered the final proof of her own insanity. "Mark, please, stay away from me," Mark shouted. He grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling. Rebecca, come in here. You were right. She's dangerous. Call the doctor. Call whoever you need to call. I can't do this anymore." Sarah stood frozen in the center of the room. She had used her best weapon, the truth, and Rebecca had turned it into a suicide note. She was now in a far worse position than before. She wasn't just a troubled wife anymore. She was a self-confessed threat. The drive, her only hope, was now the primary evidence for her commitment. The 4th of July arrived with a mocking brilliance. The sun was a white-hot disk in a cloudless sky, and the air hummed with the sound of cicadas and the distant pop of early firecrackers. From the window of her bedroom, where Mark had insisted she stay to rest, Sarah watched the neighborhood transform. Jennifer Lewis was already there, her massive Stanley Cup in hand, slurping aggressively as she directed the caterers. "Oh, the hydrangeas look a bit wilted, don't they?" Slurp. Such a shame. Sarah usually has such a green thumb. Slurp. Rebecca was everywhere. She wore a stunning white sundress and Sarah's heirloom pearls, her laughter floating up to the window like a taunt. She was the perfect hostess, greeting the partners from Mark's firm with a warmth that made them beam. She was already Mrs. Johnson in every way that mattered to the world. Sarah knew the deadline. Rebecca had mentioned it accidentally, while bringing Sarah a tray of tea that smelled faintly of sedatives. At midnight, after the fireworks, Mark would sign the papers. The private security team, disguised as event staff, was already stationed at the perimeter. She had to move. She waited until the party reached its peak, the sound of a jazz trio masking the noises of the house. She didn't try the door. She knew it was locked from the outside. Instead, she turned to the one thing Rebecca couldn't steal: her knowledge of the house's infrastructure. When they had renovated the old Victorian 3 years ago, Sarah had insisted on a top-of-the-line integrated smart home system. She had written parts of the security code herself. She knelt by the floor vent, the cold metal biting into her knees. Using a nail file she'd hidden under the mattress, she unscrewed the grate. She reached inside, her fingers searching for the secondary data line she knew ran through this junction. She found it, a thin, braided cable. She didn't need a computer. She just needed to create a bridge. She took the wire from her bedside lamp, stripped the ends with her teeth, the copper tasting like pennies and electricity, and touched them to the data line in a specific, rhythmic pattern. Click, 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 click. It was a manual override, a back door she'd installed just in case. The electronic lock on her door chirped and disengaged. She slipped out into the hallway, moving like a shadow. She didn't go for the stairs. She went for Rebecca's guest suite. The room was chillingly empty of personality, except for a high-end travel vanity. Sarah searched it with frantic efficiency. She felt a loose panel in the velvet lining. She pried it up. Inside was a leather wallet. She opened it. Emily Vance. The face in the ID was Rebecca's, but the name sent a jolt of recognition through Sarah. Vance. She remembered the name from Mark's early files. The Vance crane and rigging bankruptcy. Mark's firm had handled the liquidation. It had been a brutal, scorched earth case that had left the Vance family penniless. The father had committed suicide a month later. This wasn't about a trust fund. It was about revenge. Total systemic replacement as a form of poetic justice. Looking for something, Sarah Johnson? Sarah spun around. Rebecca stood in the doorway, a silver syringe held casually in her hand. The needle caught the light, a wicked metallic spark. Emily, Sarah said, her voice steady. Your father's business. That's what this is. Rebecca, Emily, smiled. It was a beautiful, terrifying expression. Mark didn't just take the money, Sarah. He took our name. He took our history. So I thought it only fair that I take his and yours. You have such a lovely life. It would be a waste to let it go to someone so unstable. She stepped into the room, her movements fluid and predatory. The syringe is just a mild sedative. It will make the transition to the facility so much easier for everyone. Mark won't have to see you scream. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah said, her hand closing around a heavy glass paperweight on the vanity. Emily lunged. They collided with a force that sent them crashing into the glass display case against the wall. The sound of shattering glass was like 1,000 bells ringing at once. Sarah felt a sharp pain in her shoulder as a shard sliced through her linen shirt, but she didn't let go. They tumbled to the floor, a chaotic mess of white silk and beige linen. Emily was stronger than she looked, her fingers clawing at Sarah's face, trying to find a vein for the needle. Sarah grabbed Emily's wrist, twisting it back. Mark, Sarah screamed. Mark, help me. The struggle was raw and ugly. They rolled through the broken glass, the scent of old pipe tobacco from the study below rising up through the floorboards. Sarah felt the needle graze her arm, a cold, stinging prick. She surged forward, slamming her forehead into Emily's nose. There was a sickening pop, and Emily let out a guttural snarl. Subverted Phase 1. Smart decision. Sarah saw her opening. Emily was dazed, blood streaming from her nose. Sarah pinned her down, her knees heavy on Emily's shoulders. She grabbed the syringe, which had fallen to the rug, and held it to Emily's neck. Stop, Sarah shouted. Mark is coming. Everyone is coming. I have your ID, Emily. I know who you are. If you move, I'll inject you with your own poison. Just stay still and tell the truth when they open that door. This is over. I've won. Sarah felt a surge of triumph. She had the antagonist pinned, the evidence in her pocket, and the moral high ground. The guests would see her defending herself, and Emily would be exposed as the aggressor. Phase 2. False positive. Emily stopped struggling. Her body went limp, and she looked up at Sarah with wide, watery eyes. You're right, Emily whispered, her voice trembling. I'm sorry. I wanted a family so badly. Please, don't hurt me. She began to sob, a pathetic, broken sound. Sarah felt a flicker of pity, but she didn't lower the needle. She heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. The door burst open. Mark was there, followed by Jennifer Lewis and several other guests. Sarah looked up, a triumphant smile beginning to form. Mark, look, I found her ID. Her name is Emily Vance. She tried to drug me. Phase 3. The crack. But Mark wasn't looking at the ID. He wasn't looking at Emily's bleeding nose. He was looking at Sarah's hand, the hand holding the syringe to a sobbing, cowering Emily's throat. And he was looking at the tablet Emily had dropped on the rug. The tablet was glowing. It was showing a live feed from a hidden camera in the corner of the room. But the audio? The audio wasn't the sound of their struggle. It was a pre-recorded loop of Sarah shouting, "I'll kill you! I'll kill everyone in this house!" played over the silent footage of the fight. Phase 4. Catastrophic reveal. "Sarah, drop the needle," Mark said, his voice shaking with a terrifying cold fury. "Mark, no. The audio is fake. She's—" "We heard you, Sarah," Jennifer Lewis chimed in, her voice shrill with horror. "We heard you screaming from the hallway. And look at her. You've broken her nose. You're attacking a guest in our home." Emily looked up at Mark, her face a mask of pure, calculated terror. "I just came up to check on her. I thought she was lonely. And she went for my throat." Sarah looked at the tablet. She realized with a gut-wrenching horror that Emily hadn't been trying to win the physical fight. She had been performing for the camera. She had let Sarah pin her. She had let Sarah break her nose. It was the ultimate social evidence. To the witnesses in the doorway, Sarah wasn't a victim defending herself. She was a violent psychotic having an unprovoked break. "Mark, please, look at the ID in my pocket." Sarah reached for it. "Don't move," one of the security guards shouted, stepping forward. Mark looked at Sarah, and for the first time, there was no pity in his eyes, only a deep, abiding fear. "I'm signing the papers, Sarah, right now. You're going to get the help you need before you kill someone." Sarah was tackled to the ground, the needles skittering away. As the guards pinned her arms, she saw Emily wipe a stray tear and offer a small, sad nod to the guests. Sarah hadn't just lost the fight. She had provided the final, undeniable proof that she was a danger to society. She was being led away in her own home, while the woman who had destroyed her life was being comforted by her husband. The foyer was a blur of flashing blue and red lights. The pop, pop, pop of Officer Davis's knuckles echoed against the marble tiles as he watched the paramedics strap Sarah into a gurney. "Ma'am, please stay calm," Davis said, his voice flat and professional. "We're just taking you somewhere safe." "She's Emily Vance," Sarah screamed, her voice cracking. "Check her bag, check the vanity." Emily stepped forward, a cashmere shawl draped over her shoulders. She looked like a grieving angel. She reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind Sarah's ear. The movement was slow, intimate, and absolutely terrifying. "It's okay, Sarah Johnson," Emily whispered, leaning in so only Sarah could hear. "I'll take good care of Chloe. She already calls me Mama when you're not around." She straightened up and looked at Mark. "I'll handle the police, Mark. You go with her. She needs you." Sarah was wheeled out into the humid night. The fireworks had begun, great bursts of red, white, and blue blooming over the suburban rooftops. Each explosion felt like a physical blow to her chest. She was loaded into the back of the ambulance, the heavy doors slamming shut with a final, metallic thud. But as the ambulance began to pull away, Sarah felt a cold, sharp object in the palm of her hand. During the struggle, she hadn't just grabbed the paperweight. She had grabbed the small silver scissors Emily used to snip threads. She wasn't done. The ambulance was a mobile cage, smelling of latex and stale coffee. The paramedic, a tired-looking man in his 20s, was busy filling out paperwork. "I need to use the restroom," Sarah said, her voice small and broken. "We're 3 minutes from the clinic, ma'am. Just hold on." "Please, I'm going to be sick." He sighed and unlocked one of her wrist restraints so she could reach the basin. In a single fluid motion, Sarah drove the sharp point of the scissors into the communication console on the wall. A spark erupted, smelling of scorched ozone. The lights flickered and died. The ambulance lurched as the driver reacted to the sudden loss of dashboard power. Sarah didn't wait. She shoved the paramedic, who was caught off guard in the dark, and scrambled for the rear door lever. She tumbled out onto the asphalt while the vehicle was still moving, the rough road tearing at her skin. She didn't stop. She ran. She didn't go to the police. She didn't go to a friend. She went back to the house. She moved through the woods at the edge of the property, her bare feet silent on the damp earth. The party was still going, the guests oblivious to her escape. They were gathered on the lawn, watching a slideshow on the massive projection screen. "And here's a tribute to our wonderful hosts." Jennifer Lewis's voice boomed over the speakers. Sarah reached the external server hub near the pool house. This was the heart of the house's digital life. She didn't need a password. She had the back door she'd created. She pulled her phone from her waistband. She'd managed to snatch it from the study during the chaos and plugged it into the hub's maintenance port. Access granted. She didn't just have the Project Phoenix files. She had the raw footage from the study, the real audio, which the server had backed up before Emily's deep fake override. And she had the surveillance photos. She opened the projection system's queue. She deleted the tribute slideshow. On the massive screen, the image of Mark and Sarah at their wedding vanished. In its place appeared a grainy, long-lens photo of Sarah at her father's funeral. Then another of her at the grocery store. Then the documents. Vance, crane, and rigging. Liquidation summary. The crowd went silent. The only sound was the rhythmic whir-thwack of the sprinkler. Then the audio began to play. Not the screaming, but the recording of Emily in the guest room, her voice cold and calculating. "I took your name. I took your history. I thought it only fair that I take his and yours." Sarah walked out from the shadows, her white shirt stained with blood and dirt, her hair a wild tangle. She stood directly in front of the screen, her silhouette a dark, jagged hole in the center of the evidence. Mark stood at the edge of the patio, his face pale in the flickering light of the projection. He looked at the screen, then at Emily, then at Sarah. Emily was backed against the plastic fence. The mask had finally cracked. Her face was contorted in a snarl of pure, unadulterated rage. "You think this changes anything?" Emily shrieked, her voice no longer melodic. "You're still the one who broke. You're the one who can't even keep your own life." She lunged at Sarah, her fingers hooked like claws. But this time, there was no camera to perform for. There was no pre-recorded audio. Officer Davis, who had arrived just as the broadcast began, stepped forward. He caught Emily by the arms, his knuckles popping with a series of loud, rhythmic cracks. "Ma'am, I think you've said enough," Davis said. The police led a screaming, struggling Emily Vance, no, Rebecca Miller, toward the cruisers. The guests stood in stunned silence, their perfect suburban night shattered by the raw, ugly truth. Mark walked toward Sarah, his hand reaching out. "Sarah, I didn't know. I'm so sorry." Sarah looked at him. She looked at the house, with its hospital white walls and its identical beige linen sets. She looked at the neighborhood, where everyone was still holding their Stanley cups, waiting for the next bit of gossip to slurp up. She didn't take his hand. "I know you didn't, Mark," she said, her voice surprisingly calm. "That's the problem." She turned and walked toward the street. The fireworks were over, leaving only a faint scent of sulfur and a haze of smoke in the air. She had reclaimed her name. She had reclaimed her history. But as she walked away from the flickering screen and the silent crowd, Sarah realized she didn't want the life she had fought so hard to save. It was a script, a performance, and for the first time in years, she was ready to write her own. The streetlights hummed above her, a long line of white LEDs stretching out into the darkness. She didn't have a plan. She didn't have a backup. She just had the road and the quiet, steady rhythm of her own heart. 1, 2, 3. She wasn't counting for safety. She was counting the steps to somewhere new.